Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My name is Clayton Craddock, and my guest today is Choroszewski. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad you can be a part of it.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been wanting to do any kind of podcast, and I'm glad to start with a friend of mine. That's a good place to start for me, I think.
It's been a long time since I've actually seen you in person, just like a lot of people during these times. But
that full year and a half, yeah.
Glad to see you in virtually, which you can't see on this podcast, but you can see it on the video when you see the YouTube video. But I realized that you're from Long Island.
No, I'm from Queens. When I was a kid, I was born I was born in Manhasset in Nassau County, but that was just my parents looked for a better hospital than they could. That's all. So born in Manhasset. Go ahead.
What part of Queens did you grow up in?
I lived in Flushing till I was 5.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Like a very residential part of Flushing. Yeah, over by I guess Francis Lewis, Utopia over there by the cemetery. So.
Did you go to where'd you go to elementary school?
Well, that's when we moved. My father's work was shifting to decidedly more of a New Jersey based kind of thing. So that summer I turned 5 was when we moved. So like a month after I turned 5, that August, we moved to Central Jersey. And that's when we moved to Branchburg, temporarily to Branchburg, New Jersey, near where I still live, Somerset County, northern central New Jersey.
Was it at that point where you saw a drum set and you're like, you know what, this is what I want to do for a living?
No, that actually had hit, if you can believe this, that hit me much earlier. It's one of those possibly instinctive things that possibly wired in the DNA thing. No one showed me the drums. No one encouraged, like said, like, oh, you should try this. As like my mother's father, my late grandfather, he passed away when I was 10 months old. So I never actually knew him as a conscious young person or adult. And he was a club day drummer. That was his passion. He ended up having to go right into a day job because he had a family early in his 20s. But so he worked for like the phone company, but he was a true weekend warrior of like New York and like the Queens area in particularly the 60s and the 70s. And so that drum thing was somehow in me, in my family DNA somehow. So as a young toddler, I was doing the typical pots and pans things, and I would set up whatever toys I had in an arrangement that resembled a drum set. It was just something I just started doing, and it wasn't shown to me or encouraged by an outside influence. So
did your parents go out and buy you a real drum set shortly afterwards?
Not shortly. The progression of instruments was, I guess, a common one for a young kid. When I was young, it was like the toy drum set thing. Like when I was probably 3 or 4, I had like the Smurf drum set with paper heads. back in Toys R Us, there used to be a wall of paper head drum sets. That's gone now. But and then progressed to a better toy instrument when I was 6. And then finally, when I was 9, about to turn 10, that's when we obtained some real professional drums. My mother's brother, my late Uncle Bob, he was not a professional drummer, just like an enthused hobby drummer. And so he sold me his then Slingerland kit because he assumed he took over using my late grandfather's drums. So at that point in time, he kind of passed on his Slingerland kit right when I turned 10. So I guess I had real instruments from age 10 on.
Were you taking drum lessons at that point or before?
Yes. My parents, when we moved to my parents' current house, which is in Hillsborough, New Jersey, when I started 3rd grade, that fall of 3rd grade is right when my mom enrolled me in local music store lessons in Somerville, New Jersey. So I was just it was like a small music studio, loud practice pad, in the 80s, the Remo practice pad. And it was basically practice pad lessons for 2 years before.
Did you learn starting out traditional grip or match grip?
Match grip. Traditional grip made an appearance in high school. And I adapted that into my bag of tricks also. But it was
What made you decide to adapt that style?
The traditional grip thing came about because of my high school's marching band program. The high school that I went to had a very serious, very competitive marching program. It was fashioned after the DCI drum corps model of performance that was happening around, and we would have instructors who were from that world. So it just became decided that our snare players would uniformly play traditional grip. And I think I may have even started checking it out before I actually decided to play snare in marching band. So it evolved in high school, and then my later private teacher also covered that with me. So go ahead.
Did you play snare drum in the marching band?
For a little while. I was more enthused by it has a lot of names. Some people call it tenors, some people call it multi-toms, some people call it quads. That was more my, I think, because it resembled a drum set more to me. So it was, and I was very excited. The 1 year we got quints, where there was a 6-inch drum in the middle, like a little high pitch. But it was, 8, 10, 12, 14.
I remember when I was younger, I tried to hold up. They used to call them tri-toms, but they were like huge.
Yeah,
drums.
the predecessor to quads was in like the 70s. Was like tri-toms, 3. Yeah, exactly.
And my back and my core wasn't very strong, but to hold those things up, man, it was just like, how do you guys do that?
When I was 14, I was a skinny, scrawny kid, and here I was holding the heaviest instrument. And I mean, I'm glad it didn't have any long-term problem, any effects on my back. But I remember being like a small-framed 14-year-old holding a very heavy harness piece of equipment and for many hours because of how serious our program was. It was lengthy rehearsals. So,
did you have a lot of competitions back then? And did you win?
That was the traditional season where, we did the whole band camp in August to spend like a brutal week outside learning your show, which was the only performance program you did the whole season, and you used football games as a chance to perform that show every single week. So I'm sure the high school football fans kind of got sick of seeing the marching band play the same artsy show every week on the field. But yeah, so football games would typically be Fridays, and then competitions would be Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes 2 a weekend, all around New Jersey.
Were you playing in like rock bands, jazz bands during,
Yeah, well, I was in, as far as school goes, I was in every facet of the band program, and I was most passionate about jazz band. Jazz band was my driving force in the band program. That was what I most connected to in terms of interest and just emotional connection to the music and that particular art of playing music, where drum set driving with a band. So that, I connected most jazz, but I was involved with every aspect of wind ensemble and concert band. As far as rock bands go, not as much. I played around with some friends in a rock band, maybe probably when I was a sophomore, and nobody was very good. It didn't. We never even played a gig. It was just the thing we kind of rehearsed and messed around with. But that's not anything I would ever credit as being a significant part of my high school musical development. So yeah, I was much more academically oriented. I was very focused on the school programs, and then beyond that, programs outside of my school and the New Jersey All-State programs. So.
Who were you listening to when you were in junior high and high school, as far as drummers are concerned? Like, who were some of your influences back then?
Excuse me. I would say being influenced by specific drummers came along in my high school years. Probably in junior high, middle school, it was more about just whatever music I enjoyed. I think my brain was not yet in a place to focus on isolating a drummer's role and a drummer's impact. As far as music, I was kind of, maybe an odd kid in that respect, that I was oftentimes like an older soul. I adapted so much to music that my father would show me and I would hear on classic radio. So I actually missed out on a lot of, I was just different, that I wasn't as into the most current things. So I was in middle school, 91 to 94. And that's of course the grunge alternative years. That's when it hit. So everybody I knew was all about all those bands. And I was familiar with them. It just wasn't what I was seeking out. So
somebody said, "Man, have you heard this new Nevermind album?" You're like, "No."
No, I no. That's the thing is, I definitely heard it because it played at like every kid's house at the party. So I heard. It just wasn't like I wasn't seeking it out on my own. I heard it. I guess like atmospherically.
Yeah, it was
everywhere. Yeah, exactly. So, but I was an older soul. So and even in elementary school, thanks to my late Uncle Bob, I was a big Beatles fan. I was way into the Beatles from the age like 8 on, and then if you can believe this, like when I was 9, I got heavy into Elton John, and he's still my favorite artist of all time. I'm a huge Elton fan, so that started when I was like 9 years old. So,
all right, question: what's your favorite album by Elton John?
Oh, that's a heavy hitter because I don't think I have one. There's so many.
Okay, if you had, you remember? I don't know if you remember.
One per era.
Okay, the mid 70s.
Sure.
If you remember, I don't know if you remember the Desert Island disc. I can't remember if it was a magazine, but like if you were on a desert island, you can only take 5 CDs with you.
Yeah, back in the 90s, everyone asked that. That would be on even like chain emails, like, oh yeah, answer this. What are your 5 desert island discs?
Yes. Yeah. So if you had to take one
Elton John disc in my 5, I think I actually would take, because it's of an important time period to me. I think I would actually take one of his late 80s albums. I might actually take Sleeping with the Past from 1989. With of all people, Jonathan Moffat on drums.
What?
Sugarfoot.
Really?
Yeah. And I saw him on tour. I saw him, Sugarfoot, Jonathan Moffat.
Wow.
In the 1989 tour. I was in the then Brendan Byrne Arena, later called the Continental Airlines Arena, Izod Arena in the Meadowlands. And my parents got seats behind the stage, like really like bad seats. Like they're actually behind, but behind the stage, you can see the whole rack. And I didn't even know who he was when I was 9, but I later figured out, oh, that's who I saw. I was watching Jonathan Moffat do his crash behind his head.
Yes. Yeah. I wonder if I guess he probably did that before, what's his name? The drummer that played for Prince, John Blackwell.
Oh, yeah. He was much older. Yeah.
I should go back and check out that album.
That's the. I mean, he doesn't do it. It's just it's appropriate drumming, but it's colorful in the way that Jonathan Moffat did. But yes, that's going back to saying that's the music I was originally listening to that wasn't necessarily of the moment, geared towards young people. When I was in high school, I started getting a lot more into drummers, and that's when the jazz thing happened, and I became aware of big band and fusion, and so people finally showed me Dave Weckl, and that all happened in high school. So that was more of a teenage years kind of thing.
When you finished up high school, did you say, I want to pursue a career in music? And
yes.
Why? And what made you say, music instead of something else? Were you interested in anything else other than like pursuing a career in music?
Not enough. No, I believe I would say I was laser focused on a life in music. Wow. Nothing else was of interest enough. I mean, I didn't have a backup plan. I guess when you're 17, you don't think of a backup plan. You just kind of go for the thing that you're trying to do and that you're most interested in. But I think it was because I was doing very well musically on the high school level, and that I was making it into the top of All-State in New Jersey. And so I was gauging my ability to place amongst music in terms of auditioning and being able to function within a high performing ensemble, such as like the New Jersey All-State Wind Ensemble. And so I fit in that level. So that's what gave me a clue that like, I'm not fooling myself. I had a chance at making a serious run for it. So by the time I was a junior, senior, I was specifically preparing to do a performance audition for music school and picking the schools that I was going to go for. So
did you have an idea of what kind of career you wanted to have after graduating college?
Yes, and this sounds crazy, but the Broadway bug had bitten me very early, and I was aware of that. I was aware of that career, and I wanted it since I was a young teenager. So I was even though I went to school as a jazz studies major, my I don't think my intent was ever to perform jazz as a career. I don't know who fools himself into thinking they're going to play jazz full time as a career. That's kind of a problem with the university structure. Like, yeah, we're going to take all this money to train you in jazz and nothing else. That's a whole other can of worms of a topic of the university, the academic approach to career readiness. But yeah, so even though I was majoring in jazz, I was, even before college, aiming for hopefully a life on Broadway or show drumming, let's call it.
Okay, so what was it that made you interested in show drumming?
A very specific thing. I think I was aware of show music, musical theater, loosely in my young years, but I don't think I fully understood what it was. Like, my parents actually never took me to a Broadway show. Shame on it. No, they're going to listen to this. No, but my mom was familiar with. My mom had seen some shows growing up in New York, and I think I had heard her listening to like the chorus line cast recording, but I didn't fully understand what that was. But what really got me into it was when I was in 7th grade. I was in the Central Jersey Region 2 Orchestra. So they placed me with the orchestra when I made Regions, and that orchestra in the repertoire for that program was a medley of music from Miss Saigon. It was a Miss Saigon medley, and within the small percussion section, I actually auditioned within the section for the chance to play the drum set part to this medley. So they actually held like a little quick runoff audition to see who could play the drum set part to this medley, and I won out that small audition, and that got me electrified. So I love the idea of playing the drum set part with an orchestra. So, and I love that. I was like, what is this music? What is Miss Saigon? And then that it kind of snowballed from there. That led to seeking out what is that show. That led to obtaining the cast recording and becoming obsessed with it. And that led to seeking out other cast, like, okay, what are some other shows? The shows that have cool, because Miss Saigon was quite a intriguing piece for someone who's a drummer and a percussionist. It was like probably some of the most eclectic sounds you're ever going to hear, at least in that time period, in the early 90s, mid 90s, of percussion and drum sounds in a Broadway show. So I found it electrifying. So,
question: did you ever get a chance to play it on Broadway?
No, I was a little young for that moment in time. Miss Saigon closed on Broadway when I was a junior in college, so I was not.
It came back though.
Yeah, it was a different thing. It was that 1-year thing. Ray Marchica, I was amazed. He was so cool. He got to do it because they combined the books even further. So he was doing a very. I hats off to him, and everyone was sub for him. That would have been difficult for me to prepare because of all the sounds that weren't just drums. So no, that the moment had passed, the original run. But what I did get to do, I had an opportunity that I kind of sought out when I was a sophomore in high school. When I was 15, I found my way into watching in the pit. I found my way into sitting with Howie Joins and watching him play a performance of Miss Saigon in the pit when I was 15, and that was like head exploding, life changing. That was really probably one of the ultimate life-changing days that I can recall in the first half of my life.
So you wound up doing what you wanted to do, but you went to college to study jazz at North Texas State?
That's the former name. Yeah, but by the late 80s, it was called the University of North Texas State. But yeah, people from a certain generation all refer to it as North. It's commonly called North Texas State. And people remember when it was a
University of North Texas.
That's the current name.
Now, where exactly is that? Because I know somebody else went there too.
Yeah, it is in the city of Denton or Denton. I don't know how the correct local pronunciation of Denton, which is sort of at the top of what they call the Golden Triangle in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Mm-hmm. So like Interstate 35 comes down from Oklahoma and it splits right in Denton. So 35 East goes to Dallas, 35 West goes to Fort Worth, and those cities are neighboring side-by-side cities.
Okay.
And Denton's kind of on top of that, like 45 minutes to the north.
All right. Why did you choose University of North Texas as opposed to Berkeley or
Well, I'll tell you,
somewhere else?
Berkeley was ruled right out because of the money. That
Mm.
that was that just because of my parents and the financial situation that was where we were at. Berkeley was not an option. University of North Texas is a big state university in Texas, so I'd say more affordably priced. But that was on my radar specifically because of my band director in high school, Mindy Shireman, excellent band director, really passionate, more concerned for students, more invested in students than you'd ever imagine a band director could be, like a really passionate person. And she put University of North Texas on my radar because she was very in touch with the academic world, and she knew which schools had the best programs for certain types of music. And the 1 o'clock lab band is the best known big band from the school, and they sometimes go around touring, performing at schools. And there was I think our school was once going to maybe take a bus trip to see them perform. Didn't work out, but so that school was on my radar as being like, if not the top competitive, rigorous programs for jazz and drum set instruction. So I looked at a few other schools, but that was sort of like the main focus of I should probably go there if I really want to elevate to a competitive professional level.
Do you still keep in contact with some of your contemporaries that went to school with you there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there are some important connections that I'll get to. But yeah, friends that I was in that class with, I talked to constantly. Yeah, that was.
So you were a jazz performance major?
Correct, yeah.
And you said you had some issues with being, I guess, focusing on jazz performance as a discipline, or is it something that you had a problem with from studying it, or you just saw that it wasn't something that you thought?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a problem or an issue. It was more just like seeing where I fit in versus, and what's cool is that the school is gigantic. It's a huge program, so it's not like a conservatory or like a small jazz where it might be like you and Owen, the other jazz drummer. It's a giant program. So there's even there's a whole structure of competing for opportunities that are scarce within the program itself. But the cool thing about being a huge program is you meet a lot of different people, and not everybody's the same. Not everyone's cut out. And so I met some really cool guys, people I'm still in touch with, at least on social media, who do a variety of gigs that have nothing to do with jazz, which is very cool. A shout out to my friend Matt Thompson, who's been the drummer for King Diamond for years. He's like an excellent metal drummer. So, for example, but so what I saw in that program was there was some people who were very tailored for the straight ahead jazz thing. Like that was their passion. That was their blood, and they could really adapt to that. It came to me less naturally because that wasn't what I came about being influenced by. So I was sort of in that program side by side with people who sort of maybe were more, I don't want to say knowledgeable or passionate about actually playing authentic or contemporary cutting edge or straight ahead jazz. And that was kind of eye-opening to be alongside people who went about it differently, had different passions. If that makes sense.
Were you involved in a lot of ensembles there, and what kind of things were you a part of?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, not as many as I'd like to be, just because it was such a gigantic program. In retrospect, sometimes I wish I had gone somewhere else where I could have been involved in ensembles from the beginning of my college, because college is short. I mean, it can be long if you want to make it long and hang out for a while. But
yeah, it was kind of long for me.
But the way it was for my family and we pretty much allotted me 4 years and a little extra to get it done. So I didn't even get to play in a big band my freshman year, which was like a real drag when you think about it. Like here, like you just came from this high level of performance in high school, and just be like, you spend months not even playing the kind of music that you're best at playing. That was unfortunate. But when I did finally compete, get my way further into the program, yeah, I played in a variety of the lab bands. There's 9 lab bands that rehearse at different hours of the clock some are actually simultaneous. Some actually don't rehearse at the time they say they're called. But like, I made it as far as what's called the 3 o'clock lab band, which apparently I guess other contemporaries like Keith Carlock that was his high benchmark to reference some people maybe in the 3 o'clock. But yeah, I knew friends of mine were playing in the 2 o'clock and the 1 o'clock, the really high competitive band. And I had a semester in the school's only fusion group, only ensemble. It was a keyboard-based ensemble. Dan Hurley's ensemble with 4 different keyboards called the Zebras, named after the black and white of the keyboard. It goes back to the 70s, but it was still around when I was there. And so I played a semester, and that was what I was tailored for. And I played in a guitar ensemble, which is kind of like a fusion group that had 5 guitars and a bass player, and I think it may have been keys. Very, very unique kind of group. There was a couple of guitar ensembles at school. So, but there weren't. Oh, go ahead.
That's one thing that's interesting about going to college. If you're like a big fish in a small pond, and then when you go to college, you realize a lot of people are big fishes, and everyone's on a certain level, and you got to compete with others. It's eye-opening and it's humbling at the same time. And,
right.
Eventually, there are certain people that will stand out, but it was an interesting experience for me going to a college and then realizing a lot of other people around me are just as good as me. So anyway.
Certainly. And I knew what I was getting into going to a school like that. Like I think I specifically chose a route of going to a place where nobody was going to tell me I was amazing. Nobody's like, oh, you're so great. You're the best drummer in the school. Like some people can go to a place where it's a smaller place, and that can be their experience, and there's benefits for that too, because you get immediate opportunities. But I think I knew what I was getting into, where I was getting, definitely small fish.
Now, I wasn't a drum set player at Howard University. I wasn't even a music major. I was
right. I remember you saying that. Yeah,
I was in the marching band, and I just remember, I think it was 87. Now, Gordon Campbell had come in 86, I think. Oh, man, he's going to probably kill me for
revealing his age.
No, 87, I think. I can't remember when he came. Damn, maybe he's 88. Yeah, I think it was 88. But
take away Gordon Campbell's not in his 30s.
But I just remember him coming in, and I just remember watching him play. We had tri-toms, and he was just an amazing player. And I knew he played in the Howard University Jazz Ensemble. But I remember when I was on my way out of college and out of the marching band, and one of my colleagues in the band was saying, man, there's a young drummer here that is just incredible. I mean, he's like killing it. He's just tearing everybody apart. I was like, who is it? He said, he looks like a little kid, man. His name is Chris Dave. You should just check him out.
Oh, wow.
And of course, we know how great he wound up being. But some people just come in are just way above everyone else. And everybody's like, oh, snap. So it's kind of cool to be in that environment, just like it is being on Broadway. I mean, there's drummers that are incredible, and we're all good at what we do. And I just believe that there are some drummers that are just more versatile and more better than me. And of course, I can only do certain things. But you are versatile. You can do so many different things. And that's why you've done so many different shows and been so successful. So after college, you were laser focused on Broadway. You came back to New York and did what?
Well, I took a quick detour, because I think that's what I finished school right at 22. I did it in 4 years and like a little bit of a summer semester. So like right before I turned 22, I was done with Texas, and I got my Bachelor of Music in jazz studies. So what do you do with that? It's like they say in Avenue Q. Like, what do you do with the BA in music? It's in English. BM veteran. So that was a brief chapter where I sort of didn't have an exact plan of how to go about. I figured it out quickly, but I went home to Central Jersey, and I wasn't doing all that much that was getting me towards what I wanted to do. I was doing temp jobs, obviously just to pay bills, and playing in a hard rock cover band and doing a couple theater gigs, like a high school thing and all that. But I quickly realized that was a slow path that wasn't going to go in the direction I wanted. So I quickly changed courses and went for the cruise ship scene, which is probably what I should have done right out of college. So I guess I wasted 6-7 months not getting on that path. But cruise ships were the logical step for me because it was an opportunity that was open to fresh college graduates. You know, it was, that scene was very welcoming of hiring people in their early 20s, and it was not only show drumming, it was a variety of everything. It was all kinds of, but of course, but all very reading based, very, very much based in chart reading and playing with click. So cruise ships was a very logical place for me to go to, and that's what I did at 22.
Royal Princess Caribbean cruises.
I worked for both Carnival and Norwegian Cruise Lines. And
you did shows, Broadway shows on those ships?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them Broadway shows. I mean, yeah, there was Broadway music, but the style of performance was so very different than what we do in our you know.
In what way? I've never done it.
And it's funny. I actually knew what I was getting into because, again, I knew the differences because, if you can believe this, both my high school chorus and my high school band had both, we took an annual trip, like the band trip and the chorus trip, and I was in both programs. So lucky me, I got to spend the whole month of May on vacation, basically, when I was in high school. I could at least two trips. And both groups had taken a cruise on the same ship. So on Carnival's old ship called the Fantasy, I had taken as a passenger with the chorus and with the band, and I had seen the production show. So I knew what their production shows kind of looked and sounded like. And the one thing I noticed when I was 17, seeing the show, is I remember watching the drummer. The band was kind of off to the side of the stage, and what he was playing wasn't necessarily matching what I was hearing out of the sound system. And that's when I learned that there's pre-recorded parts on some of these shows. So it doesn't matter that you're playing. The band is almost like a live prop on stage. Like, you're playing, the microphones are on, depending on how much the sound man wants to put the live band up or not. But there's pre-recorded tracks. So it's like I guess they don't trust the people, a fail-safe system where I noticed that when I was 17, seeing this production show. I was like, okay, I heard that, but he's not playing that from what I was watching on the corner of the stage. So that's one part of it. A lot of the production shows, I mean, maybe it's different now. I haven't been on a ship for like 17 years. So, but then there was a thing where like you're playing along with a pre-recorded track. So it only makes sense to play exactly what's on the track for the production shows, for the dance shows. It's so weird. And there's much more instrumentation. You have the instrumentation that's on stage is basically like a glorified, almost like a smaller school jazz band, like a reduced part, smaller horn section, rhythm section, but you might hear like an orchestra on the track. So it's definitely like a fuller, sweeter track, but everything's on there. So you're just playing along with the pre-recorded track, but a click also. And a lot of times the click and the track didn't line up with some really poorly created materials. It was better when it was when you're playing shows that weren't with a pre-recorded track. Like if you were playing for an entertainer, like they would call them fly-on entertainers, like a guest singer, or even like a guest juggler, or like a violinist who would play with tracks and use the band also. Right.
How long did you do the cruise ship thing?
For the better part of 2 years. Took a couple breaks to come home for some family functions, but I over the course of 2 years, yeah.
Then you came back, and we're back in New Jersey, and we're looking forward to opportunities in New York City. Yeah,
basically, I made the conscious decision of this ship would be my last ship. This was in the fall of 2004. I remember actually, I funny story. Earlier that year, I had seen Michael Blanco, the bass player, a buddy of mine. I had seen him, and he said something to me like if you do any more cruise ships, I'm gonna kick your ass. Or something. He was saying, I think he was trying to tell me that like I think I had done enough, and it was time to come to the city and get off the ships, because I had gigged with him on the thing before, well, in between ship contracts. So yeah, so in the fall of 2004, I made the decision that, okay, this was the last ship, and I was going to just do what it takes to just stay put and get started on the New York scene from the winter of 2005 on.
So what was the first thing you did as far as breaking into Broadway?
Well, yeah, I guess at that point in time, I was saying yes to all, like you do when you're brand new, I was saying yes to all the little gigs, all like like cabarets and small things. I guess the first show that I did was an double Off-Broadway. It was officially Off-Broadway. It was downtown. It was a show called, I don't remember the name of the theater. I think it was the Transport Group. It was called The Audience. And I shared the gig with Greg Landis. So I guess it was a scheduling thing. So maybe he was originally going to do it. So Greg did half the dates and I did half the dates. And that was in the spring of 2005. So that was my first New York production.
So that was your show, or you were subbing for Greg?
It wasn't clear. It was I think both our names were in the program. It was a very rare split gig. Like it was both our gig depending on the day. There was a chunk of time Greg couldn't do it, so I started it and then Greg did the rest of the run. Very, very unusual, but it was cool. That's where I met Greg. Yeah.
And after that, then what was the next progression?
After that, I was very fortunate to actually get in line with my first Broadway subbing opportunity. That was that came up very quick. I have my very close friend Sean McDaniel, who a lot of people recognize from all things Broadway. He's a very, very important and very successful in this scene. And Sean's a college friend of mine. He's 4 years older than me, but I crossed paths in North Texas actually, and that was a very, very, very fortunate connection to make, where we both realized we're people who are enthused about show drumming, which was a rarity down at that school. So we became fast friends, bonding over that specifically. And then Sean came to New York before I did. I was living in New Jersey, but he left Texas and went to New York and stayed there. So he was recommending me for things as soon as he could, which I am forever grateful and indebted to him for. And one of the things that came up was that there was the Broadway production of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And a lot of the musicians weren't the typical musicians that were doing lots. There was a contractor was the late Sam Litvia, and the drummer at the man on the drum book was Ed Fast. And at the time I heard he was looking for a new sub or two, I guess, or Sean had heard. So Sean put he recommended me to him, or told me to make contact on his recommendation. So I got in touch with Ed Fast on that recommendation, and very thankful to Ed. He decided to give me, when I was 24, my first Broadway subbing opportunity.
So what was it like preparing for that?
It was huge for me. It was like, I would say, I use the term laser focused, but it was like my life revolved around that preparation for that month or two. That was all I cared about. I was living in an apartment in Weehawken at the time, so I still had all my drums and gear back at my parents' house, an hour away. So I would just drive out to their house and practice at their house. I made the setup as best I could with whatever gear I had at the time, and it was just constant practice. And I was lucky to actually it was early times for this, but they made a conductor video. So I was able to study a conductor video, which I think I copied off the DVD. And I think I watched it probably 8 times, which is more than I watch shows now if I'm going to sub. But when you're brand new, like, why, if you have the free time, why not? And if they're open to having you, obviously they want you to absorb as much as you need. So I think I watched 8 times to really know exactly how it went, what to expect from the conductor and parts.
And I'm sure it went well.
Yes, it sure. I mean, it was intensely scary, but
as it always is.
Yeah, that show itself, fortunately, is maybe not the most rigorous of shows in terms of the material. But I felt very fortunate that I had a positive start to this whole crazy thing, because it's not always as smooth as that. There's a lot of ups and downs, more difficult people and difficult experiences. But that one was distinctly a positive experience. Everyone in the orchestra, I was the youngest person there, but everyone in the orchestra was so kind to me. And the conductor was Kristen Blodgett, and she she designated me on my first show.
Really? Wow.
So like, I don't think I think at 24, almost 25, I don't think I even captured the weight of like what that meant. Like, yeah, you're already designated. So that was
before you go on, share with people what designation and approved means on Broadway.
This is, oh yeah, I'd be happy to expand on that. And this, I've actually found that this is the terms of this are different depending on the show. Some shows have looser terms and of what they consider approved, and some shows have very methodical, by the book, like numeric systems of so before, let's talk about approval first. Approved is something that is usually determined about a sub based on one, at the most two performances, I would say, where based on your performance, your first performance as a sub, especially if the conductor, if the music director happened to be in that day, if they didn't put you in with the associate conducting her that day, based on that performance, are you approved to come back? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're in for the run of the show. Things could go south after that, but are you approved? Will they let you back in the door for a second chance? And so that's like a level to guess you're approved to come back. Or maybe the conductor wants to decide on, they might not say decide on somebody after 2 or 3 shows. It depends on the conductor. So that's my understanding of what being approved counts as. Now, being designated, that is a status that is earned by a sub on a show. And some shows it's expected to be earned, otherwise it's not going to work out. Designated is where the MD and maybe the associate and maybe even the in-house contractor, whoever the powers that be are within that pit, decide that sub's performance is solid enough to be considered on par as the regular. So there's no issue with them being placed into any performance, meaning them being there is as solid as the regular being there, and that that sub could be in to play when a first-time sub comes in on a different instrument within their section. That's generally my technical understanding of it. So, and a lot of shows won't designate somebody until at least 5 appearances, and then it might take you longer than that to even earn that designation. But you're usually informed by the in-house or the MD, like, okay, you're designated now. And it doesn't always happen. And I've also played on shows where it's a lot more loose than that, and I've never even heard that word thrown around. So it really depends on the show. But I think designation for where on shows where that is a thing, where that does matter, is essentially saying that your performance adequately represents the regular. So if you're there, it's a non-issue.
So you were designated after your first time subbing on a Broadway show.
Yes, that's heavy, and it's certainly something I never expected. Like I understood, like, okay, I prepared for it, like my life depended on it. So I guess that's going to happen. That's what would lead up to it. But yeah, that was a very positive start to the subbing experience in that way.
Did that lead to any other subbing opportunities?
That particular show, I don't think it did, in terms of directly rooted from that show. Any other subbing opportunities that I got subsequently came as a result of different connections. But what that show did lead to was that contractor, the late Sam Litfia. He was mostly a tour contractor. Broadway was a rare foray for him. So it was. I don't know what business terms why it came to be that he was the New York contractor for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but he was mostly a tour guy. And one of his tours, it was the Troika tour of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, starring Patrick Cassidy, was out already, and the drummer was leaving the gig for another gig. So a replacement was needed for that tour. And based on hearing about me from doing well subbing on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Sam invited me to take over that tour, which coincided with actually Chitty Chitty Bang Bang closed New Year's Eve, New Year's 05-06, and then that tour needed a replacement in January of 06.
Oh wow! So you went right on tour.
Correct.
That's
after
good.
Subbing, yeah.
How long was that?
The tour, I did half that tour. It had been in progress since the the year prior. So I was on that chair until it closed at the end of July. So I guess 7 months
Okay.
of that show.
And so you got a little taste of making steady money playing.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
great. It's a great feeling. I had that feeling when I went out on the bus and truck tour of Footloose in the year 2000. I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to drag my drums around, and I get a big $750 a week. I'm rich.
Yeah. and I was very fortunate, even though this was Troika, this was an equity tour. So it wasn't the bus and truck model. I was actually staying in a city, in a hotel for a week and sometimes 2 weeks, and traveling on Mondays. It was that model. So I was very lucky to get that opportunity early, just at the age of 25. So that was.
So you came back, you start looking around for opportunities to sub again?
Yes, I probably would, had I not been engaged already still married to my my wonderful wife. Had I not already been engaged, had I been single, looking back, I probably would have toured more throughout my 20s. But it came to, I was settling into more of a commuter domestic situation earlier on than maybe some do it. But yeah, as a result of that, I was back in the New York area by the summer of 2006. And yes, I was looking for, I was like, the thing to do. Okay, I did that tour, and now I'm going to pursue more subbing opportunities. As my main thing.
You became domesticated.
yeah, I sure did. Yeah, that was.
It's a wonderful thing, people. I'm not gonna lie. Being married is a wonderful thing, from what I hear.
Right. Yeah, no, I know that is a can of worms that you have.
I'm plenty just joking. No, I'm seriously. Being married is a good thing. I'm all for marriage and family. I love my kids, just like I'm sure you do too. You have 2 kids, correct?
2 kids, correct.
Great. Let's not talk about family here. Let's talk about drums.
Right, yeah.
So
forget them.
Even though you're in Stanley Drive there.
Oh, yeah. You said, yeah, that's a quick little anecdote. My eldest son is named Stanley. When I lived in Westchester with my wife, we lived on Stanley Street. So it's not the main reason, but that's a small piece of inspiration for why his name is Stanley. So
really? Okay.
We lived on Stanley Street. So my mother-in-law gave us a Stanley Street sign.
Wait, did somebody rip it down? Like, how'd you?
No, that's a fake street. Can you imagine?
Take it.
Yeah, but yeah, I digress.
So, start looking for opportunities, and then what was the next thing that came your way?
That summer, I was another cold call situation where it was recommended. I believe this recommendation actually came from a great percussionist who plays in all around New Jersey, Philadelphia, and New York, a man named Ed Shea. I had met Ed Shea in March of that year on the Joseph tour. He was the local percussionist in Philadelphia. And he was the percussionist on a show. It was Martin Short's show. It was called Martin Short, Fame Becomes Me. It was Martin Short. It wasn't a one-man show. It was Martin Short and a small ensemble of actors. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen, and on Broadway. And it was a situation where at a right time, I got in touch with Rich Mercurio. I cold called him, or based on the recommendation, and Rich was receptive to having me in. I think he liked the fact that I was very available. I didn't have much else going on, so I was available to cover pretty much any date he threw at me. So that started that connection, and I can't say enough good things about Rich Mercurio. If you want to talk about one of the best players to ever do it, so somebody who makes any music he touches, he is the feel man. He will make it feel as great as it can possibly feel. If you want that feel, call Rich Mercurio. That's all I can. That's what I can say about him. And what a kind, warm person. That's so important. So Rich was kind enough to bring me into that situation. So my next show to sub was Martin Short, Fame Becomes Me.
I haven't heard. I don't know much about that. How is it's a one-man show, and
well, it's a small ensemble.
Okay.
Yeah, it was mostly sketches. It was a musical, but it was like musical sketches, and it was just so funny. Really.
Did you follow Rich to sub at Little Shop of Horrors? Was that around
that
that
was
time?
prior to that. That was when he did Little Shop. I was still working on cruise ships. I did see that show, but I hadn't met him. That was prior. Yeah,
I think that's where I don't know where I met him, but I was going to bring up something that you were going to talk about before, as far as being approved and designated and doing a show, and I was going to ask you about people when a conductor gives you notes after a show.
Sure. I have a lot of experience with that.
Well,
yes,
I bring that up because I subbed for Rich Mercurio at Little Shop of Horrors back in the early 2000s, and Henry Aronson was the musical director, and I just remember, I think that might have been the second show I subbed after Rent, but I just remember getting notes and not being sad that I got them. When I get notes, I want to know what I need to improve on. So when you get a note, Shannon Ford said, "You know what you should say when you get a note? Say thank you, and nothing else. Just this is what they're there to help you get better." So Henry Aronson, I used to be nervous when he'd pick up his pad like during the show and write.
Oh, that's the worst. That is the worst. When they're writing about you.
Yeah. So
I've been in pits where I'm like grumbling to myself, depending who like put your pen down, like just.
So he pick up his. He did this one time to me. I said this on another podcast, but I told him, it's like, every time you pick up your pad, I think you're like writing about me. So during a quiet part of the show,
this hits home.
He's like, "Hey, Clayton."
So he starts teasing you about it.
Yeah, he was just messing with me. I was like, "Damn, man, okay, now you're just playing with me." But you do think about, oh my God, I made a mistake. He's gonna write about it. So he picks up, he or she picks up their pad. But fortunately, the more you do the show, the fewer times they pick up their pad, the better you're going to be. Then you can you don't necessarily want to relax totally, because you're still there doing a job, but then you can talk to the guys and women in the band. And
yeah.
So tell me about your note taking or your note experience.
Oh,
overall.
This is all over the place, because this depends. And I've done a lot of subbing at this point. So I've had a variety of experiences with note giving. And what I've learned is it really is about the conductor and his or her personality and approach, hands-on or less so hands-on approach to a show. Some people are very meticulous, and you could be somebody who has subbed at a show for years. I've been where it's almost not about you. It's almost like the way this conductor works is they're going to give notes no matter what. So even if you've been subbing on a show for 4 or 5 years, you're still going to get notes. There's a couple people that are like that, and they have every right to be. It's their job. It's just, that's one approach. And then there's some who are definitely a little more relaxed, or I don't know if entrusting is the word, where like once you've settled into your place there and you do what you do, it's not necessary for them to tweak your experience. And I find it's very different from show to show, from person to person. I've had, one experience I'll share, and this isn't a negative thing. It's just the way it was. When I was first subbing at the Lion King, Carl German, the MD there, he's the kind of MD that will give you a lot of notes, constructive notes, for a while. Like, not just your first show, for your first, at least for me. I don't know about the other subs at the time, but you'll get multiple note sessions, and not just like coming by the pit with hey, a couple of things, like meet me in my office, and which is a little off-putting, because you might think like, oh shoot, like this is it.
Going to the principal's office.
No, but it's weird for him. That's just his thorough way of doing it. It was like a note session where he's not annoyed at you. It's not like, oh, it's just more like, oh, this and this and this, and it's just, so that's an example of someone who's very thorough. And for many of your first times in there, you'll get a lot of information. So that's an example of somebody who was very, what would be the word, effusive with
meticulous.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that some conductors, like when I was subbing at Cats, the last go around under Bill Lanham, the conductor would, after either the first act or after the show, would say, yeah, and Mr. Mistopheles, in the second half of measure 32, you played mezzo piano instead of piano. Could you please play? I'm like, oh my God, how can you hear that?
Yeah, no. Yeah, there's some people who are microscopic.
Yes. Yeah, play play 1/3 off of the ride. So make sure. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. And we adapted because, as we know, there are some people who are like that, and some people who are the complete opposite of that. Like, neither's like wrong or right. It's just like it's a personality thing. Yeah, some people will microscope you. Yeah, exactly. Like the third beat of bar 32, more mezzo piano, exactly. And some people be like, yeah, man, feels great. See you next time. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And sometimes those people, you kind of know you made a mistake. They'd look at you in the monitor, be like, then you made a mistake and you know what it was.
That's the most professional thing for an MD when it doesn't need to come up in the note session. You're fully aware that mishap happened. You don't have to have a conversation about it. Like, especially if it's a show you've subbed 100 times.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Like, okay, we had that moment. We had that moment. Okay. Right. I missed that. God, my bad. But like, so that does not need to come up in a note session, I feel, when it's mutually acknowledged, especially with a glance. Like, I know.
So after subbing for Rich, you went for looking for more opportunities.
Yeah, that was a slow climb. I don't think I couldn't say that things snowballed from there. It was, because we realistically, it wasn't that established yet. Like, it wasn't like, oh, of course, yeah, call him. It was kind of a slow grind for a year or two to make more and more subbing opportunities happen. It's like slowly added on to onto the short list of shows that I was able to sub.
So this is kind of important when looking for opportunities, because I'm sure you've had people reach out to you when you've had your own show.
Yes.
And there are people that ask you to come in to watch or ask you for opportunities for them to sub for you. What are some things that people should do, and what are some things that people shouldn't do when contacting someone who has a chair on Broadway?
Yeah, I have opinions on this, and I try to keep very a positive outlook on this, because I realize not everybody knows, and so I don't want to say things that would like make anyone feel bad or self-conscious about like how they may have accidentally approached someone or approached someone when they knew less about how to do things. But there's a certain protocol that I think is appreciated and expected maybe by those who are familiar. Like, I guess there's a certain protocol, let's call it, in which that you can approach somebody in a respectful, humble way. Like, obviously, arrogance is off-putting, and I've heard other episodes where people say, yeah, like, I mean, yeah, it's obviously off-putting to come at somebody and be like, oh, I'm amazing. But I think to have the thing to have is an understanding of your place, in that, especially someone who doesn't know you has no obligation. They don't owe you anything. So, start with a baseline of that they don't know you. So approach someone in that way, which in a more humble way, with no assumption that because you're contacting them and because you think you're good, that they'll of course have an opportunity for you. You have to have the understanding, especially if a show is already on its feet for any amount of time. There's a good chance that all the places that are available for someone to sub are filled at the moment. And it's very unlikely that at that moment in time, when you got in touch with them, that there's an opportunity for you, and that they would even consider you, as opposed to someone they already know about, someone they're friends with, someone that the musical director recommends. So I think having a place of understanding of what your potential place in this equation is key. So if you approach someone kindly, respectfully and with zero expectations. That is a very good professional way to go about it. You know, it's of course, you can certainly say, I'm interested in subbing, I'm looking for some sub work. You can be upfront about that. You don't have to be, I would always find it strange if someone would come to watch me when I had my show and like would try to like sneak it in there that like, you know, like you don't have to do that. I think it's unless someone states otherwise, like unless someone's like watching for different reasons, like, oh, hey, I'm a percussionist, I just want to see how a drummer does. Like that's, I've had a few watchers like that where it wasn't somebody who was seeking to sub for me or that kind of opportunity. It was just someone who wanted to see how this particular show is done. Sure, I've had those watchers, like, yeah, someone who might be a percussionist and wanted to see, oh yeah, how does a drummer play the show? That was cool. That was more of like a shared educational experience. So not everybody watches for the same reason, but otherwise, you can probably safely assume if someone's like new or in the scene or a younger person, that they're probably looking for subbing opportunities. You don't have to kind of like be sneaky about that. That feels kind of disingenuous in a way. So it's okay to state that you're looking for sub work and then have the understanding that good chance it's not available for you right now, but the best thing you can do if the person who contacted you is open to it is meet them and have that experience, watch them play that show in person. And then that person knows who you are. You've had a face-to-face conversation, you have face-to-face recognition of each other. It's not just a name on an email anymore. It's a shared personal experience. Does that answer that?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, I feel the same way. I'd rather know that what the purpose of our interaction is, because people do say, yeah, I just want to watch and know, and then they get there or right afterwards, you know, I just like to sub for you. And I was like, you know, well, it's a really weird kind of situation where, like you said, they're coming in under different circumstances. They're trying to get in for a different reason, but they're not upfront about it. But anyway, I don't want to. You said it more eloquently than I did.
Do it again.
And there are people that do things that are clearly like kind of odd and makes you think. It's like
yes, there are. The longer your show runs, or the more popular, you will have some odd encounters with personalities that you find foreign. No, I don't mean like globally foreign. You know what I mean? Like a foreign personality to what you have kind of come to expect as a what would we say, a most common respectful personality within our community.
Yeah.
If someone's kind of a bit of an outlier to that, it'll stand right out.
How'd you get into The Lion King?
Oh, well, The Lion King was something I guess I was seeking out for many years because I'm close with Tommy Igoe. I knew him since I was a teenager and I had been studying with him privately. I started studying with Tommy actually when I was in college, when I would come home on holiday breaks. He lived in New Jersey at the time. So I would have my North Texas thing. And then when I'd come home for holiday breaks, I would go to Tommy for private lessons. And it was a completely different experience and amazing. I will tell anybody he is one of the greatest drum educators, one of the greatest teachers that's ever walked the instrument. He's an amazing teacher. So I've known him since I was a teen. And it was just, and I always knew, I always thought that would be cool. I would love to sub The Lion King for Tommy. I watched him play it in the pit when I was 18. I came back from college one summer and I watched him, and that was fascinating to watch him do his thing and lead the way he does. And it was just a matter of time of when when he felt I was ready, and when there was an opportunity of an actual like a sub vacancy where I could get in there. And when the time came, he actually did push me to come in pretty quickly. I had the materials for a while, but he didn't really need anybody, like, he let me have a copy of the book, and I made a recording, but I guess I loosely worked on it, but I knew there wasn't an immediate opportunity. So then when early in 2010, when that opportunity presented itself, when there was a sub vacancy, that's when he had me like really get together in about 3 weeks. And actually, interestingly, that was also already in the context of playing Avenue Q. So that was the first Broadway show I subbed while playing Avenue Q. We can get into that. That's a business model that I learned from you, actually. The sub out of your off-Broadway show to play a Broadway show.
Yeah, well, talk about how you got Avenue Q.
Well, did you want me to say any more about The Lion King and Tommy, or just
we'll get back to that. But
okay.
So tell me, after subbing around in the mid 2000s,
yeah, and later, yeah, the road to Avenue Q, it was went like this. I had been in Michael Kreuter is an amazingly kind person and a excellent musician, not just a drummer and percussion. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and he's a producer. He's really he's that excellent combination of a kind, warm personality and talent across the board. So that's the nicest I can say about Mike Kreuter. And he was the original drummer of Avenue Q on Broadway. And he's another person I had been in touch with for a while. He knew I was interested, and we would keep up about it. But I guess it was the same thing where there wasn't a sub vacancy for a little while. But he knew I was right there, and he was receptive to keeping me in that information chain. And then in 2007, there finally was that opportunity. So that in the summer of 2007, I put in a lot of time, and I got that book together and went and subbed Avenue Q on Broadway in the summer of 2007. And because of my availability, I admittedly wasn't doing all that much else at the time. I was very available, and he was at a busy point in his career where he had a lot of dates. He had to be out for a lot of things. So for the last 2 years of the run on Broadway, I was in there a lot. I was saying yes to every call. So being available is a great key thing for a regular to have a couple subs who they know they can, and not just somebody. And it's one thing when it's like the person who's available is not necessarily the person everybody wants in. That's kind of a sticky situation. Like, oh, this person's always available. Yeah, do we really want him in? I was fortunate that I was doing well there. I was well liked, and I was available. So I was in there playing Avenue Q constantly the last 2 years of the run, 07 to 09. And that was very, you want to talk about positive experiences that you could have subbing on Broadway. Anybody who had the experience to sub Avenue Q on Broadway at the Golden Theater was treated to a rare, fun, positive experience. It was the atmosphere of the room. That's all I can say. And that started from the top. That was Gary Adler, the great Gary Adler, the music director. That was the mood. He set that. So anyway, I was a very successful sub there. And then September of 2009 is when Avenue Q closed on Broadway. And I was away for a couple of weeks. I was covering a few weeks of the Monty Python Spamalot national tour out west. They were like between drummers and percussion, so they asked me to do a couple of weeks. So I was in, where was I? I guess I was in San Diego. I was in San Diego, California that night. Back in New York, Avenue Q closed, and there was a surprise announcement that the producers made a surprise announcement on stage that instead of closing, that Avenue Q would live on as a smaller production in an off-Broadway theater. It was the first move of its kind. Like, instead of killing a Broadway show, put it into an off-Broadway theater to run on a smaller budget and see how. And it was like, basically an experiment, I think, but no one knew how that would work. So I immediately sought that opportunity, and I was like, I need to do this. So I was in touch with all the powers that be, and a few. Because first, I assumed he might want to do it. Wasn't sure. He wasn't sure. He kind of chewed it over for a week or two, and then he ultimately decided he was too busy, had too much going on, did not want to do the off-Broadway version. Which for the regulars, that would mean doing your same gig for less pay. Off-Broadway is a smaller pay scale than Broadway. But for someone who has nothing going on, a regular show is a regular show. It was a great opportunity. So a few weeks later, while I was still out west playing Spamalot, I got the call to take Avenue Q at New World Stages off Broadway, and that started immediately. There was no lag time. It was like it was like, oh, we're going to do this next year. It wasn't like that at all. It was like, this is happening right now in 3 weeks in October of 2009. This is going. So I was thrown right into that. So that's how the Avenue Q Off-Broadway gig came about. It was a result of subbing for a few years and being well liked by the powers that be.
Did you, the set that you had there was your drum set?
Yes, I was told to provide everything. They decided to not do a rental or have a show by the kit. It was a bring your own stuff situation. So I had to quickly purchase a lot of gear that was show specific.
Was that a brand new drum set back then?
No, that kit was actually, and I did a quick and exhaustive search for drums. That I was specifically looking for a kit that had a 20-inch bass drum. I liked playing that show with a 20, and I had a few kits at the time, but none of them was a kit with a 20 that I wanted to leave parked in a theater for who knew how long. So I was looking for a kit that I could, and it just so happened there was a kit at a Guitar Center, pre-owned. It's not there anymore, in Larchmont, New York, in Westchester, and there was a Yamaha Oak Custom kit that had a 20, no snare, 20, 10, 12, and a 16, a bigger floor tom. And then I looked online and I found a couple matching floor toms that were smaller. A drum store happened to have a 15 that matched that finish, so I bought that 15 separately. So I assembled that kit by getting the used kit from Guitar Center that had a 20, 10, and I bought the 15, which was a size I always loved, from a random music store somewhere online that happened to have a Oak Custom 15-inch floor tom. So that's the genealogy of that kit.
Well, getting that kit in that area where you performed for so many years, how in the world did you have to bring it up there, or did they have people put it up there for you? Because the drum set is in a very and the pit is in a really interesting location.
It was a makeshift room. It was a loft above the stage that was converted into a room that wasn't ever really a room. No, everything came in and eventually out the New World Stage's office. The door you'd walk through in the back. Really? So I really, because it was on that same floor. So I just wheeled it in through the office, opened that door, and that's how I let it in. Yeah, nothing ever came up and down the stairs.
Oh, okay. Now, that makes sense now.
Yeah, that would have been insane. People would have been injured. Drums would have been damaged.
So you got your first gig, and you got steady money, and did you feel that you got to where you wanted to be professionally? I mean,
I was ecstatic to have that gig. That gig was an absolute blessing because honestly, things weren't going well up at that point in time. This was right in the middle of the economic crash of 2008. Things were bleak for a while. In 08, 09, there was subbing opportunities suddenly got scarce. I mean, I was still playing Avenue Q on Broadway. That was great to have that subbing, but not much else was coming up. And it was getting a little dicey around the summer of 09. It was almost to the point where I might have to fill things in with some alternative employment to kind of stay afloat. So that was, admittedly, things were a little bleak right then. So that gig was just, it couldn't have been timed any better. And the fact that it was successful was unexpected, but also a blessing. So that was, I was ecstatic. It was just the best thing that could have possibly happened.
From that gig, did you get any kind of endorsement opportunities?
Not from that gig specifically. And I, as far as endorsements, I still haven't even gotten to where I'd want to be in terms of, I'm admittedly not great at selling myself for opportunities or promoting myself for that kind of thing. I had a very fortunate meeting and hookup. I've always loved Sabian cymbals since I was in high school. And that opportunity finally came about many years into the run of that show. Actually, I'd say the catalyst for making that happen was actually when I temporarily left Avenue Q for a leave of absence, which you're very familiar with, when I went to go take over Finding Neverland on Broadway. It was around that same time that my deal with Sabian was cemented. But that came from a fortunate meeting actually through Sean McDaniel, who just a few months before me, he switched to Sabian, and I get to meet Andy Zildjian through him. But as far as drums, sticks, heads, and anything else, I've got none of that. So I did talk to Yamaha briefly, a connection, but that never went anywhere. So yeah, no real endorsements came as a result of that show, aside from Sabian, but there's a few factors.
It's so interesting. A lot of the drummers that I speak to do use Sabian, other than Bill Lanham, who uses Peisty. But
yeah, Sabian's got a good, strong foothold on Broadway. I like that. There's a lot of us.
Yeah, I need to look more into them, because now I'm starting to think. I mean, I've always grown up playing Zildjian cymbals, but
sure,
it's always, more cymbal manufacturers to look at. But Avenue Q, you had a steady gig, and you started subbing around a lot more, or were you always subbing around a lot from the late 2000s?
Well, I at that point in time, when Avenue Q Broadway closed and my New World Stages gig opened up that fall, I actually wasn't currently subbing anywhere. I wasn't currently on any Broadway books. The only show, I think, after Avenue Q closed, the only thing I was really subbing at the time was Altar Boys, and Mo was doing it at that point. He had left already, so I had to politely bail on Mo and for the rest of that run, and then so from there, so for the first few months at Avenue Q, I wasn't subbing out that much. I was in most of the time because that was necessary. It was necessary income for a while. But a few months in, winter of 2010, that's when I sort of started that machine. Thanks to Tommy in that invitation to finally get in at the Lion King. That's when I began this thing that I like to think I mastered down to a science: the art of subbing Broadway shows while you have an off-Broadway gig, which was specifically learned and inspired by you.
Really?
Oh yeah, because you had Altar Boys in your world, and you brought me into that. Very grateful. And you would often, a lot of my calls to cover Altar Boys for you would be, I'm not sure what all Broadway shows you were playing, but I know you were playing Rent for Jeff Potter around 08. And
yes.
So you would leave Altar Boys for the night to go play Rent, and I would play Altar Boys for you. It was really good, and I learned. I was like, okay, cool. This is what you do. It's actually okay to do, if you can believe that. I know this might, to people who aren't from this scene, this might sound like shocking form, where you can sub out of your own gig to go sub somebody else's gig on certain terms, and the most common way that is kind of financially speaking, trading up for the night, because a Broadway scale is just so much more income than an off-Broadway show. So it's lucrative. It makes financial sense, even to sub out of your own gig to go sub on Broadway for somebody and have one. It gets your subs in and lets your subs play your off-Broadway show. And I really maximized that technique of scheduling. So, and I started seeking out more and more Broadway subbing opportunities came about during the run of Avenue Q, including some new lessons.
How did you prepare your first sub to sub for your show, knowing what you had to do for others?
Oh, very thoroughly. And Avenue Q was an interesting, a very unique situation in that it came preloaded with subs. The Broadway run had just closed, and I had no reason to exclude anybody. I certainly wouldn't do that. So I inherited everybody else who was a sub from Mike Kreuter on Broadway, and I was happy to use everybody. And so that was cool. There was a little bit of an adjustment period where, like, as naturally happens, I play the show a little differently than Mike, especially as time goes by. So some people may have been playing it as they learned it, the Mike Kreuter version, and whereas people who I brought in as needed, you being one of them, learned my version. It's still the same show, but in terms of, like, you know what I mean, like the nuances that a specific drummer brings to a part. So I didn't need to bring it. It became necessary to bring in an additional sub by that spring due to my Broadway commitments.
Spring of 2010.
Yeah.
You went on an odyssey of having a show and then started subbing around town on many different Broadway shows. Uh, when I was speaking to Sean McDaniel, I told him he gets a special award for having subbing on the most shows at one time at 11.
That was insane. Yeah, he was telling me all about it back then. I was out on a cruise ship, and I would talk to him on the phone when I would get into a place where I could actually use a cell phone, like somewhere on that. And yeah, in 2003, he was telling me like it was insane. And not just he was even playing multiple books on certain shows. He was covering a couple percussion books. Yeah, he was. That is freak of nature territory. Yeah.
Well, you've done a lot too. What's the most amount of shows that you subbed at one time?
My max density that I've reached, I call it, my show subbing density was actually fairly recently. It was about probably it's supposed to be in 2019 or early 2020. I was between 2019 and early 2020 pre-pandemic. I had gotten to the point of subbing 6 shows.
Oh my God, really?
That's a lot.
Man, okay, second place award goes to Joe Choroszewski.
I tried the best I could do to even get close to.
Not an award here, but anyway.
No, that's a great award. Yeah.
6, man. Wow. Well, you are. People had you there because you're very good and you're very versatile and you know how to do the subbing thing right, and you know how to play shows, and it's important to know. I mean, subbing is a very specific skill, just like playing a show.
Yes.
But it's such a intense thing for a drummer because the drummer is often the heartbeat of the band, and it's a lot. There are a lot of times where you're exposed and you can't really make any mistakes, and it's a pressure filled environment. So, you know. What advice would you give? I don't know if I asked you this already. What advice would you give to someone about subbing? Like, what should someone know? Well, here's the question. What should someone who's subbing a show, what's something that they should always do in a Broadway pit?
Let's see. I made a few notes to myself. I'm trying to. It's tough to say because having been in so many different subbing situations, it's almost hard to identify there as there being any one through line as like this is the always thing. Aside from the basic things that have probably been said by lots of people are almost kind of cliche. And the one thing is it's a balance of always be humble, understand your place in that picture. You know, you're there to cover somebody else's gig. It is not your gig. It's, you know, so be humble about your place there. You don't have to be like, you don't have to take that too far and like, you know, there's a balance with that too that I could always get into in terms of like taking input from people who aren't in charge of giving you input. That's especially for younger players. That's an interesting balance to walk. But to understand your place, that you are there to serve this purpose and to represent this exact part that the regular plays, that whoever you're subbing for. But I don't want to say contradictory to that, always play confidently. So it's a matter of like humbly understanding your place, but bringing what you do musically with all your confidence. So that's a balance I've learned to walk, where you're not there to show anybody up. You're not there to be bigger than you're supposed to be, but you also need to play at your level where you understand what I'm saying? Where sometimes people can play in a way that almost seems constantly hesitant and constantly timid. That's not going to work. You have to play like you belong, play like you know it, if you know it, and you should know it. So play like you know it, play with confidence, but humbly understand your place in that bigger machine that is the Broadway show, the Broadway orchestra.
When I have people sub for me in any show that I do, I make sure that I watch them play the show. At least I watch them play a certain amount of songs in order for me to know that, okay, they're going to be all right. With the last show that I have, Ain't Too Proud, when I had people come in, I can tell by the first measure of the first song if they can play the show. And you talk about coming in there and being confident. When I had people that were actually subbing the show, like yourself, when you came in and you play the first fill going into the first song, the way you do the things you do, and you play the first beat, I was like, okay, you got it. I didn't even really need to hear the rest of the show because you came in and you know how to play this stuff, and you study the music and you study the show, and it shows. And that's something that's important when you come in. You have to play assertively, but like you said, you kind of have to know your place. Your job is to just basically emulate the drummer that played the show that is off for the night. So I tried to play like you when I was subbing for you at Avenue Q, and then when I went in, I changed the book. And I'm just kidding. Actually, you know what? I got to tell you, that happened to me. I'm going to just put this out there because that happened to me at Avenue Q. This is what you should not do. I'm going to ask this question to you too, but this is what you do not do when you're sub. I had a sub at Altar Boys who came in and changed the sounds of the V drums. Reprogrammed the drums, dude. It's like me going in, it's one thing.
That's next level. That is.
You don't go in and then retune the toms of the drums that you're playing on. You don't change the angles of the drums, except for like the snare drum and maybe the hi-hat or the
yes,
the throne.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. like that throne height and snare height and angle might be necessary. Ask first. It's usually cool. Just ask.
And then you put it back. So, but anyway, this guy changed everything, and I got a call from Jason Lafredo when I was playing a wedding that night. I saw him ringing my phone. I'm like, oh no,
right?
And like, this guy can't come back.
You don't want to see a call coming in from your MD while you're off the gig.
Exactly.
During the show.
Oh, it's the worst feeling. So yeah, don't do that. So you, the reason why you played 6 shows at one time, which I'm going to ask you. Well, the reason why you play those shows is because you know what you're doing. You know how to approach it. You know how to play confidently as well as humbly, and you know what your job is. So those jobs were what? You had 6 shows at one time. Which were they?
Oh, the most recent, the cluster of 6.
Yes. That was cluster of 6. What were the cluster of 6? I like that.
And this is what led up right up to the pandemic, and unfortunately, 2 of these won't be returning, which is a heartbreaker. But so the 2 shows that aren't returning that I was on was Frozen, Disney's Frozen, and Beetlejuice. So the other 4, which are still alive, Wicked, The Book of Mormon, Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations, and Moulin Rouge. That's right. You and the merch.
You'll be back as soon as I know what the deal is. It's it's a weird thing going back, and we'll see what happens. And I don't even want to talk about anything like that.
Right.
So 2010, you have your show. It's running well. You're subbing around town.
A quick thing about that year. That year turned really interesting in an unexpected way, because the next show I subbed after The Lion King that spring was Promises for Perry Cabaret, and that turned into a very unexpected situation that Perry fell ill that summer. He had a serious health issue for a while. I ended up playing that entire summer at that show.
Oh wow!
So I was Avenue Q was less than a year into the run New World, and I was having to sub out entire weeks to cover Promises, and that was very interesting. And then Perry got a bit better that fall, and he was well enough to take. He left Promises to do the first production of Elf, the musical, for the Christmas season. So when Perry left to do Elf, I was hired to finish Promises. So Promises on Broadway was officially my chair, well, as a replacement, or technically the absence, but it was the closing October to New Year's of that year. So that was I ended up missing a lot of Avenue Q for the rest of 2010.
So that was the first time you actually took somebody's kind of a leave of absence.
Oh yeah, lengthy. Yeah, I played the majority of that run of that show.
Oh wow, that's great. Shortly after that, you did some stuff with Clay Aiken.
Yes, well that excuse me, that is a direct result of my dear friends Sean McDaniel and Ben Cohn. They've been Clay's music team for years and years. Sean has toured with Clay on multiple tours, and Clay hadn't toured for a while, but I guess in 2012 his star was on the rise again for a minute because he had done the Celebrity Apprentice with that whole thing. So he did a tour again, and it was his Christmas tour, and at that point in time, Sean was unavailable to do that tour. So they called on a trusted friend who could also play pop music. I was very, very grateful for that. And that was basically a little more than a month, just a Christmas music tour, the Joyful Noise Tour 2012. Yeah.
You also work with Mario Cantone too.
Yes. That came about as my good friend, Matt Perry, who's an amazing piano player and probably one of the just jolliest personalities you'll ever meet, but just like an ideal personality to be around in a musical setting. He brought me into that for some one-off gigs. Mario never toured, but when he would do like a comedy show in the theater, he has a musical set as part of his. At least then he did a show. So,
tell me about this Hearts and Lights thing, the Radio City musical.
I'd be happy to. Yeah, Heart and Lights at Radio City. That was a big experience. That was a many years of time and dedication, and never to be seen, which we'll get to. Gary Adler from Avenue Q is one of my great close friend and one of my best musical connections that I've ever made. He's just I'm always thankful to him for calling on me for certain things. He started calling on me around 2010 actually to start workshopping some ideas with the Radio City Rockettes, just informal sessions with the choreographer, and like not the full group of women, just like a couple. There's a couple Rockettes who are sort of like in with the creators and they help create material. And they've always been slowly for years. They're trying these ideas to develop a spring show, not Christmas, like a spring season show. I had heard there's been an Easter show in the past. So it has a history, but like in that decade, they'd thought about reviving the idea of a springtime show featuring the Rockettes. So it started to come to fruition very slowly. Lots of workshops. They're basically just making a brand new show, original material with a story. And Gary kept me involved. It was good. And the choreographer liked working with me, Linda Haberman. She was a really excellent professional at what she does. And it was just a lot of developmental work sessions of developing this show for Radio City with the Rockettes, and there'd be workshops, and we did it kept getting tweaked. And I think their versions of it kept getting rejected by the higher ups. Like, oh, it needs to be this. So that would mean more workshop sessions. I guess it was, maybe it was ill-fated in that way, and that it kept getting rejected and tweaked. But, and then we got to the point in 2013, we did a full presentation of it in the hall, like for the corporate types, and playing. Yeah, like it was staged only with piano and those V drums, as Radio City does, V drums and piano, but like fully staged with like all the Rockettes and some featured performers and some featured singers and some featured dancers who were Rockettes. Whole big thing, giant budget, and then finally it got greenlighted. So in 2014, it was supposed to launch late March of that year, and it was a whole side workshop. And a couple other drummers had been involved also as rehearsal drummers, and also been developing it. They had an audition for the chair, even though I developed most of it. I still had to audition for my place to be in that orchestra, and I was selected to play that production. So that was all very exciting. It was all happening. We were in the hall. We're having tech rehearsals. Tons of money was spent. There was big set pieces and lights. It was like the whole thing was in place. The show they finally settled on title. It was called Heart and Lights. It was a show with an original story that was celebrating New York City. It was basically a plot that involved New York City tourism, like seeing all there is to see around the city, but somehow involving the Rockettes also in every dance number. And it got weird. The corporate people involved, they came to see it, and they made a very, very last minute decision to not open the show, to cancel it, like days before we were going to go into previews. So it was kind of devastating. So yeah, that was Heart and Lights. The show died. It came back following year as a different thing. All the creatives were out the door. Like it was like a corporate sweep, new music team, new choreographer, just like the corporate hatchet. So I was shown the door with that whole team.
So did it eventually wound up being performed at Radio City the next year?
Under a different title.
Wow.
And with a new concept, completely rewritten. I think because of the money spent, they used some of the technical elements. They incorporated some of the devices and some of the things that they had employed. But I didn't see the show. I didn't care to. No offense to anyone involved. I had a bad taste from what I went through. I should say though, I'm very grateful for the years of work of workshopping that show and rehearsing. That was a lot of income. That was very helpful to me and my family. Because that wasn't really at the expense of Avenue Q. That was daytime work. So I was there was a period of time where I was doing well with that because I was logging a lot of daytime rehearsal hours and then also playing my show. That was a very fortunate time.
Speaking of working a lot, according to your bio here on Sabian.com, you've worked 14 shows.
Oh, as a sub?
Yeah, as a sub.
That must be the current total. I've subbed 22 shows on Broadway.
Really?
I'm the current total.
Yeah.
Broadway subbing.
Wow. Yeah. Do you have a list of them?
I do actually. I keep it on my phone so I can remember it for like.
Yeah, let me hear it. Let me hear what you've done. Is this in chronological order?
It is. Yes, it is. If we're doing this, okay. Here it is. The chronological list of shows I've subbed, and I'll just say that one or two of these maybe weren't as successful as the others. I don't want to brag and say, oh, I killed all of these. There's some ups and downs, but I've been at least invited back for these 22 shows. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Martin Short, Fame Becomes Me, Monty Python's Spamalot, Avenue Q, Legally Blonde, Young Frankenstein, Pal Joey, The Lion King, Promises, Promises, Sister Act, The Book of Mormon, Newsies, Wicked, Finding Neverland, School of Rock, Beautiful, The Carole King Musical, Bandstand, A Bronx Tale, Frozen, Beetlejuice, Ain't Too Proud, Moulin Rouge.
Damn, that's amazing. Wow. That's incredible, man. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's in total, that's been a lot of hours of preparation and sometimes anxiety, depending on how difficult or.
Yeah, man. I think you've had 22 heart attacks in like 20 years, man.
At least a couple of those were so pleasant that they don't count because they're a couple of situations were so welcoming and peaceful that I don't count them as a heart attack. They were more of that's a rare thing. So you should always appreciate when you get to work in a situation that is actually very welcoming and pleasant and low pressure. That's a gift. That's not the standard.
So you worked on that Radio City Music Hall production for years, workshopping it. Tell me if you've done workshops, readings that were about to lead to your own show and your experiences in those settings.
Yeah, in this category, I would admit that I actually haven't had that many opportunities. I mean, I've of course done readings and workshops, but nothing that was ever going to go anywhere. At least that it hadn't. Nothing that I felt was.
Did you feel that any of them were going to go somewhere?
I don't understand the business enough from a production sense to know what actually is going to strike to hit that magical thing where someone wants to say, yes, I want to produce this. I have not done that many readings. I can't say it's been like a constant part of my my career. I want to. I mean, that's the one thing I'm still grasping at. Is like if I get really honest, like I don't want to spend the rest of my days only being a sub. I mean, I'm proud to sub. I'm glad I'm good at it, or at least I'm being mostly perceived as being good at it in other people's opinions. But I don't want to just do that. Like my Avenue Q was wonderful. I'm so grateful for what it was. But the career goal that I still want to attain is I want to develop a show and have it come to fruition. I mean everybody wants that, but I haven't had that experience yet, and I don't want to give up on that. I really want that experience of developing a show, having it come to life, having it come to Broadway and staying with it, and being the drummer who gets to play it and open it and be on an original cast recording and everything that comes with that. So hasn't happened yet. I'm holding out hope, but yeah. So I the workshops I've done haven't really been of note. I've done a couple in a case where I was probably just covering for a show that someone else had already workshopped once and then just wasn't available for that round of it. So I wasn't even like the first person in the door. That happens, and then that's cool. You get to be part of it, but it's kind of more just like a job you're doing that week or two. You're like, you might not be the drummer who's creatively involved, but you're good enough to be someone that they trust to play that version of the workshop. You know, you're not necessarily, there's nobody's entitled to anything, but you wouldn't be entitled to that gig in its future life. That happens sometimes.
Speaking of cast recordings, you're on a cast recording called Brooklyn Crush.
Yes, that was, I'll tell you about that. That's my friend Matt Hinckley, who's another one. We talk about multi-talented people. He's a keyboardist, guitarist. He plays the other stringed instruments, what have you, mandolin, banjo, and he music directs. So Matt Hinckley, a talented friend of mine, he brought me into that. That was an off-Broadway show years ago. Had a little run that had an on-stage band where the actors were the band in the show. The show was about a band. And then some years later, long after the show had gone, they decided they funded a recording. They wanted to make a cast recording of the show. It didn't used to be called, when it was off Broadway, it was called Fucking Up Everything. And the title had,
Oh, really?
It had characters instead of the F word at the top of the title. So that was its original title, but they made this recording, I think, possibly for the purpose of making it available for licensing for smaller theaters and like black box theaters and what have you. Whoever would license that production, that very specific kind of show. So it was more a matter of they made a complete cast recording after the fact and instead hired, some of the actors played, they had hired a professional band to fill it out. So I learned that show in a short amount of time, good enough to make that cast recording, and we knocked it out in a day. So I wasn't involved with that show in its off-Broadway run. I just had the honor of recording it for its post-life cast recording that got released.
Sounds great. Stuff you were playing on it, I'm like, wow, man.
Thank you. And a lot of that's Matt Hinckley. That man can write some great drum parts. A lot of that is on the page. He not every orchestrator, not every arranger knows how to write a drum part. As you know, you've probably seen some real insanity thrown at you. But Matt's one of those good guys who can write a drum part that logically serves the song. So a lot of it is me just like playing the style and bringing my personality, but a lot of what's played was on the page, and he's an excellent drum arranger.
Speaking of drums and drummers, Jeff Piccaro, one of your favorite albums that you didn't play on was Toto, the seventh one.
Oh, yes.
I have never heard that. Tell me more about that.
Oh, about Jeff or that album?
Both.
Well, first of all, Jeff Piccaro, it almost sounds cliche to say in this age because people say it, but Jeff Piccaro is my favorite drummer that's ever lived. It didn't start out that way. Maybe in high school, I probably had it earlier. I might have said Buddy Rich or what have you, but that was early on. As I've musically matured and listened to the music that I've listened to, and Jeff Piccaro's drumming has had the deepest emotional impact on my music listening. The connection of the drum part to song it's made a connection with my listening that no other musician has. So that's how important the catalog of the late Jeff Piccaro is to me. So for that Sabian questionnaire on that website, they asked, what's your favorite album that you're not on? And that's Toto's 1988 album, the seventh one, has just such it's not even a technical thing. It's more just like such amazing drum performances that are recorded beautifully. The album just sounds great.
Is there one specific song that if I were to go listen to the album after this interview, which song would you say play first?
Oh, you gotta play the first track. If you're Pamela, it's an up tempo shuffly feel. It's too fast to be a full on shuffle. It's just like it's a groove song that's swung.
Mm.
Yeah. But then Stop Loving You, These Chains. Yeah, seriously, that album will rip your head off. Yeah.
Mm. I was somewhere the other day, and in the background, "Hold the Line" was on.
Sure.
And if you listen to that song, you'll hear just some great drumming that he does in there, and it's subtle, but it's kind of explosive at the same time. And the stuff,
Yes.
it's like the little things he does. It's like, holy shit!
So confident. He's 22, 23 when he played that.
Wow.
And he said in interviews that song is directly for him inspired by, or he's a bar, or he would even say he's stolen from Sly and the Family Stone, Hot Fun in the Summertime. That's that feel.
Ah, interesting.
That driving 12/8 on the hi-hat.
Mm. Just talking to a friend of mine about Sly Stone yesterday. I need to go back and listen to a lot of that Sly Stone stuff. But yeah, it's interesting to hear where people got their style from or influences from. Um, as far as the flip side of the question, as far as what drummers should never do, I always ask, what do you think a drummer should always do when they're playing in a pit of a Broadway show?
Oh, when they're as a sub or the regular?
That's a question that other people have asked me.
Yeah.
I would say as a sub, because when you have your own show, you have your own way of doing things. But if you're going to sub on a Broadway show, what should a drummer always be aware of, or what should they always do?
I think always be aware that this is kind of a broader answer. There's no set way that the experience is going to go, because each show, particularly based on the music director and how that music director runs things, is a unique experience. So have the understanding that your experience from one show is not necessarily going to be the way things go at that show. So to establish a rapport with the music director is key, to make sure and some are more open to talking than others, but make sure you have met this person and you have conversed at least briefly to the point where they know who you are before you go in and do it. And also, of course, be receptive to their notes. Even if in the back of your mind, you think maybe their notes are, for whatever reason, not right, suspect fishy, take the notes. Don't argue with the notes. Just like have a rapport with the conductor and be receptive to notes, and watch as much as you can. Get your eyes off the book, and as much as you can watch a conductor instead of your music is a really key element to it.
Kind of piggybacking on that, what do you think the most important thing any drummer should know about being a successful drummer on a Broadway show?
So I'm going to note to myself. Okay, about being successful on a show is that I think, for one thing, I'm learning as time, as we're in this current era of the business as we are, is that there's no rules anymore. There's no order of events. There's no stepping stone. People come into playing Broadway shows from all different directions, all different ages. There's no one path that's going to do it. So with that in mind, the key is to have a depth of experience in music. Now, earlier on, I would encounter some drummers who kind of talked down on the idea of drummers and other musicians on Broadway, talked down on the idea of being enthusiastic about shows. Like, oh, you listen to shows? I only listen to serious music. That's, you don't have to take that. Like, it's okay to like shows. I think having an understanding of shows and how the art form works, how this machine works, is actually very important. So it's okay to appreciate shows, but it's more a matter of not only to pair that with the depth of understanding of musical experience from the outside world. everything else, no matter what it is, whether it's if you have a lot of experience in gigging in bands, if you're hard rock, or like in the case of Matt, if you come from a place of metal or what have you, or if you've had a country career, or if you're very active on the jazz scene, that's your passion. It doesn't matter what it is. Any of those categories, any depth of musical experience will enrich who you are and what you can bring to a gig that's right for you. So having a life outside of show music is key, and having an understanding of music beyond shows is key, I think. And then that helps enrich what you could possibly bring to a show that's right for you to play, and have the understanding that not every show is right for you. Even if you're someone like yourself, like, yes, I'm versed in a lot of styles. Am I right for every show? No. There's some things I would tell you, don't call me for that. So you
like what? I'm going to challenge you on that.
Oh man,
a Hamilton?
No, I haven't played there, but I can handle that, I would think.
Tell me one show that you couldn't do.
Oh man! All right, you're really putting me on the spot here.
I seriously doubt that you can't do anything.
Okay. No, I don't have an answer prepared for that, but I'm sure. Okay, maybe. Okay, let's put it this way. Maybe there was something that was particularly very specific to ethnic music of any corner of the world.
What's that? Fiddler on the Roof?
No, that's American musical theater. I'm talking maybe something more contemporary. That's like, I honestly can't name a show that fits this description. But if there was something that required very specific knowledge of, say, like Greek or Turkish music, or something that was like,
okay.
I mean, sure, I could learn to copy it apart, but do I have a musical background and something like that? No, So it's understanding your strengths, but.
Yeah,
maybe that's a poor answer, but you can also understand what your strengths are musically. Know what you can bring, and be confident about the certain feels and styles that you know for a fact that that's something that you can bring.
I came into music theater from the pop and rock world,
right?
And when I was at Tick Tick Boom in rehearsals, there was a lot of talk about Stephen Sondheim, and Stephen Sondheim's voice was in the show. And I can't remember if this is exactly how it went down, but I always say this to people. I was asking around. I think I asked Stephen Oremus, I was like, who the hell is Stephen Sondheim? And they were like, shh, shh, shh. Like, don't say that out loud. So I didn't know very much about musical theater. I didn't grow up on shows, and I didn't know who Stephen Sondheim was, but I do now. And one of my favorite shows since I've gone back and looked at some of his work was Sweeney Todd. And I started getting into musicals and realized that I'm going in the opposite direction that a lot of people have gone in. A lot of people know all these shows, and then they come and they learn about Jeff Piccaro or Vinnie Colaiuta or Tony Williams through working with people in shows that have actually worked with those people. So I'm going back and learning more about musicals, because sometimes I do workshops or other things that require knowledge of certain styles that I didn't grow up listening to.
Right.
And to know that history and where it comes from it adds to your musical palette.
There's always room for that. Like, people shouldn't feel excluded from doing something because they don't know something at the moment. There's always room to quickly research and inform yourself. Like, what else could you do? You can't say, oh, I didn't know this to begin with, so I guess I'm ruled out. That's the right way to do it. If there's something that you want to then go and fill yourself in on and research musically, that's excellent. There's nothing wrong with going about learning about any category of this art form in any order and any direction. It's all just enriching what you know. That's how I feel about it.
Just a side question: do you prefer the musicals from the golden age of musicals? I guess from the what was that book? the scene in Avenue Q where the guy was reading a book.
Oh, I don't even know if it's a real book. It's
Broadway musicals of the 1940s.
Book, Broadway musicals of the 1940s. He's settling in with his favorite book that he likes to spend time with.
So, going back over, musical theater history, I don't know if you're a big musical history theater buff.
I'm a nerd, yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
do you prefer the musicals? It's like somebody saying, do you prefer rap music from like 1986 to 92 or rap music today? I'm like, no, give me the golden age of hip hop, because I remember it. I was
Right.
living, and it's
when,
just
when it
better.
began, yeah.
So do you prefer the musicals from that era, or do you prefer, now we have In the Heights and Hamilton and Ain't Too Proud and
No,
Tina and
my answer to this is distinctive because it speaks specifically to when I was a fan of it, like when I was in high school, and when becoming a fan of musical theater was part of my life. It was the shows that were part of it, and early on, it's definitely the pop, the pop British musicals of the late '80s into the '90s, that era. Like both Miss Saigon and Les Miserables were huge to me in terms of what I was into. And then going back, I didn't go back too far. I started getting into any musicals that were rock based. So then I went and really got into the original version of Jesus Christ Superstar and that original album. And then I got into Andrew Lloyd Webber. And so yeah, my favorite era of shows is definitely the where Broadway met pop and rock, and then the '90s. I loved the Broadway version of The Who's Tommy, and then I loved Rent. So '80s, '90s, and rock based shows are definitely my favorite category.
Interesting. Your social media presence, I was looking around for you. I see it's just unsaving. Do you not have a website?
Oh, it's funny you mentioned that. That has been a priority of this summer. My very talented wife has a web design skills that I don't have. So I had a website for a few years, and then it became defunct. It was gone for a while. So you can go check out the newly revived drummingjoe.com. I don't involve my last name. I don't want to make anybody have to spell that. So it's drummingjoe, DRUMMINGJOE.com. That is my now revived website that I've always had. Yeah.
Great.
And I have a YouTube channel that has older clips. I'll probably be adding to it in the near future. It's just mostly older clips that I once upon a time made some material for.
Speaking of YouTube, I saw you on I haven't seen the video, but you were on a video with Tommy Igoe.
Yes, that one that is definitely something I'm recognized for sometimes, being a longtime student of Tommy Igoe's. I was invited to be on his DVD, which has proven to actually be a very successful, top-selling DVD, I'm proud to say. It's his video called Great Hands for a Lifetime, which essentially is based on a warm-up routine that he learned from his father called the Lifetime Warm-Up. And it's also a complete hand technique video where he really, really breaks it down and gives people all the information and tools they know to have, as he says, great hands. So yeah, he assembled a small group of students of his who represented different levels of experience. And I was chosen to be an advanced student who is now a working professional. I was 29 when we filmed it, so I was a young professional. And yeah, that was my place. But that was a lot of pressure because I had to actually, like, if anybody was going to have to play the fast stuff when everyone else drops out, the pressure was kind of on me. So you could see me in that video really like muscling it out to keep up with him, because when he would play the most intense parts of the exercises that would have fastest tempos.
Wow. Do you have and it's right now, it's a very interesting time, and when this airs, there will be a forward movement in many different directions, but people have been doing things in many different ways and in many different outlets. Do you have anything that you're working on professionally right now, or what kind of things have you been doing over the past
nothing of my own. Admittedly, as far as the pandemic goes, there wasn't much for me to do musically. It's just I was in that place. I have a family, and my responsibilities of the past year plus fell definitely much more in the dad at home category. So I wasn't involved with anything that was going on in the virtual sense. But now that the world is hopefully opening up piece by piece, I'm getting some things in the calendar. In particular, singers that I work with. Excuse me. A big part of my musical career has always been working with singers especially in the cabaret and concert settings. I do lots of cabarets and concerts. That's been a big part of what I do. So fortunately, a lot of those singers are putting things on the calendar. So I have dates with Telly Leung coming up. I have dates with Christina Bianco. She's very talented. She does a lot of vocal impressions of famous voices. That's her big skill. And I started working with Natalie Joy Johnson. She's hilarious. So yeah, the one thing that is starting to materialize is the dates with cabaret and concert world.
Good. One last question for you. I don't think I asked this to you yet. What's the most difficult show that you've ever played, and why?
I feel like there's a few, but a couple stand out, and for different reasons. But like, I'll give you two examples of difficult. One that's difficult, but I subbed Wicked. I'm current sub Wicked, and that was a very difficult show to sub. Even though I knew it inside out. I prepared mercilessly, like with conductor video, like that. If there was ever a show that I pounded out every last ounce of preparation for, it was Wicked. And still, playing that show for the first time, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack and die. It's just that scary in the moment where it went fine. But
I gotta see this show, man. I gotta sit with Matt just to see what the hell this is all about. Everybody says the same thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't like oh, the music is so hard. No, because like I said, I knew the music. I could play it. It was under my hands. It was just being the difference of preparing while you're playing along with a recording. You have the anchor of playing along with the performance that's already there, versus when it's you're thrown in, you're driving, and that, as you've probably been told, that show is very conducted. So it's not all just like start the clip and let's groove. Not at all. There's moments of where you can groove, but then it ends and it's very conductor based. So even though I knew it and it went fine, the experience of playing that really was a force of nature. But I'd say otherwise, the other ones, when I get to that, the hardest show, I would have to say was something The Lion King for Tommy. That was because there's just such intense drumming. That's a physical drumming workout. Especially at what I learned from Tommy back then. And there's some difficult personalities to navigate in that pit. And that's one of those places where you it's not just about the drum part. It's not just about following the conductor. There are personalities in that pit that have influence over the drummer's performance, and that doesn't make it easier.
Man, oh man. I think I'm going to stick with my show, man. I'm going to
you stick with every minute of it. Yeah. You have a good thing going on.
It's rough out there, man. Shit.
I might be exaggerating. I don't know. This is just how I felt. That's how my takeaway of. I'm sure it was.
No, you're not the only one who said that. You're not the only one who said that. Even Carter McLean, when he went in, Tommy Igoe was like, "You're not ready yet," and he had to go back and prepare even more than what he had already done.
It's tough for even if you're tough for everybody. Even if you're a great player and you're capable, it's just like that show will make you work for it, and it's humbling. Yeah.
We could talk for hours, which we've already done, and I appreciate you taking time out, and it's great to learn about your history and the 75 shows that you've subbed on. And
I don't want it to get to that number.
Exactly.
Then I got to play a run of a show for 25 years. That would be
exactly. Yeah, you can get there, man. It's gonna happen. And you're out of anyone who deserves their own show that lasts for 25 years, it's you.
I appreciate that. It's kind of you to say.
Thank you once again, Joe Choroszewski. I say Choroszewski.
Nice. That's perfect. Nail it.
So don't screw up his name when you say it. But look up drummingjoe.com.
Mm-hmm. And Instagram, drummingjoenyc, and
Twitter.
I'm on Twitter, but I really stopped using it. I wasn't getting anything out of it. So that's drummingjoenyc.
It's a cesspool out there, man.
Yeah, for sure.
TikTok?
Not yet. Maybe never. I don't know.
And my kids are on that stuff. I can't.
My son's making some funny stuff. Yeah.
reach out to Joe. He's a great resource. He knows what he's doing. And thank you once again, Joe. And we will talk soon. I will see you in the fall. Hopefully, we'll see how things go.
Hopefully.
And thank you once again.
Thank you, Clayton. This is awesome.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.